Hey now, Blue Jay fans and baseball fans with nothing better to do. I am the madman across the border, the Fekless Wonder, Steve Fek, your host, handing out free passes to catch the views from the On Fek Circle, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, presented by JFtC and the JFtC versus ALS campaign. It's time to retire ALS for good, and your donation in any amount to the JFtC versus ALS campaign is the perfect way to help us help ALS Canada assist patients and their families live with this devastating, fatal disease, as well as support research initiatives and medical trials as far as treatment options. Again, it is still fatal, but there's been a lot of very promising medicines hitting the market, getting approval, helping ALS patients, live the best life they can with the diagnosis they've had. It is ALS Awareness Month, so if you head over to JFtC, you'll find a link to make your secure tax-deductible donation, or you can pick up some terrific swag at the JFtC Red Bubble Shop. Remember, 100%, 100% of the profits from the sale of all Jays from the Couch, Sunny Side of the Dome, and On Fek Circle merchandise at the Red Bubble Shop goes directly to ALS Canada. And as an added bonus, through June 2nd, every donation to the JFtC versus ALS campaign will earn you an entry for a chance to host the On Fek Circle with me. So visit support.alsevents.ca/Jays from the Couch. That's support.alsevents.ca/Jays from the Couch right now. Even as I'm talking, you don't need to look at this face. Look at your screen. Just minimize me so you can hear me and make your donation. Help us help ALS Canada, help ALS patients and their families. Thanks for joining us once again. The live stream is always Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And lucky for you, this little misadventure is not the only JFtC program available on our YouTube channel and available as a podcast anywhere, anytime that you're looking for good Blue Jays contact, Blue Jays Talk for All, quality Blue Jays coverage, however you want to tag it. You're going to find it here at Jays from the Couch. The podcast branch has terrific things. The Jays from the Couch radio podcast. We've been off for a couple of weeks. It'll be coming back on here pretty soon. It's hosted by our founder and senior editor, Shaun Doyle. It's always a lot of fun. There's a divergence of viewpoints, if you will, about what's going on with the Blue Jays. I've been very fortunate over the last 2.5, 3 years that I've been with Jays from the Couch to be in the co-host guest chair along with my colleague Karen Suter, who has a terrific show Thursdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the live stream. But again, you can find it on Stitcher, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, on the YouTube channel. There's a Jays from the Couch Facebook page. You can follow along on the links on Twitter. You can find out really kind of what we're all about and what we're up to. And be sure to join our Blue Jays Talk for All Facebook page group. And you can join the fun and the informative conversations. We host live in-game chats. And really, there's some truly great back and forths during those games. It seems to be a rotating cast of group members that come in, and they always have some really, really interesting things to say, interesting things they're noticing about the games. There's some ranting, there's some complaining, but overall, it's Blue Jays fandom and Blue Jays Talk for All. So make sure that you join. It's free to join the group. We don't charge anything, but you do need to actually join the group to get notifications and be part of the in-game live chats and everything that we post throughout the week. I got a lot of things we're going to talk about. We're going to do a little bit more history later on in the Fekless Wonder segment. I want to take a look outside the box score as we do every week. Before I get down to like a nuts and bolts part of it, I really need to talk to Blue Jay fans about this little Aaron Judge incident last night. By all that is holy, you need to cut it out. You need to stop. Stop whining. Just shut up about it. Okay. Aaron Judge hit 62 home runs last year. So even if the Jays were tipping pitches or they were getting something from the dugout, more than likely getting it from the first base coach, because the first base coach was positioned. Sorry about that. We all went black. It's actually better probably for the screen to go black than to actually have to hear me. But I'm back. But the first base coach is generally positioned. It's supposed to be inside that little box. He was way back, much closer to the dugout, getting a better look. So they used the pitch comms, so I don't think they were stealing signs, but there was definitely something going on where they were seeing it. And even if Judge did glance over there, it's Aaron Judge. Whether you're putting a ball on a tee directly in front of you or whether he knows the pitch is coming, he is capable every single at bat to knock a ball 460 some odd feet. This was Aaron Judge that it happened. But the real problem that I have with this and the Blue Jays fans' reactions, and it's not just the Blue Jay fans, it's a lot of the national media, both in Canada and in the U.S. about this. If a team is astute enough to pick up a tendency or pick up a tipping up of a pitch or whatever it is, good for you if you take advantage of it. It's no different than the old days when there was a runner on second and there were signals either, tapping on the belly if it was a slider, or across the chest or touching your shoulder if it was a fastball or a changeup coming. This has been going on throughout the entire history of baseball. This is not an attack on the Blue Jays. This is not anything where Blue Jays fans should feel slighted or being taken advantage of. And there's a lot of that line of conversation throughout social media and even in some of the comments we get, on the Facebook group page or that I see on videos that we do or on Twitter. They're not out to get the Blue Jays. There are equally amount of bad strike calls being called in Major League Baseball against all teams. Okay, I get it. You get all emotionally worked up, especially when it happens against a divisional rival like the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Orioles or the Rays or whoever it might be. Okay, I understand you're emotionally charged. It is not a campaign against the Toronto Blue Jays or the Blue Jay fans or the Canadian way of life. So I'm begging you, before you think about sending that tweet about this Aaron Judge thing, or before you put something on social media or talk to your friends about it, really stop and think, do I really think that this was a concerted effort by the Yankees to cheat? And I hate to break it to you, the Blue Jays traditionally, actually once Bobby Cox took over in 1983 and 84, once he took over, they were one of the best teams in baseball at sign stealing. And that the only good thing Jimmy Williams ever did as either a coach or a manager on the Blue Jays was his ability to pick up either tendencies or pick up signs. The Jays have traditionally been great at that. So it's not like the Blue Jays are innocent and have never, ever resorted to cheating. If you're astute enough and you're good enough to figure it out, good on you. I think John Schneider really said it best in the post game. Where he kind of jokingly said, Aaron Judge is a much better hitter than I ever was. It was Aaron Judge that hit that home run. It's great that Dan Schulman and Buck Martinez picked up on that on the broadcast, but this is not a matter for the UN Security Council to deal with, okay? This happens in baseball all the time. Everybody needs to just gain a little bit of perspective. The other look outside the box score that I want to really dive into a little bit more happened last Wednesday when George Springer was still out ill. And it was a lineup that John Schneider rolled out that I believe Blue Jay fans should embrace and hope to see on a regular basis for the rest of the 2023 season. They moved Bo Bichette up into the leadoff spot. So it was Bichette, Guerrero, Dalton Varsho, who he has really made some wonderful adjustments. He's much more quieter at the plate. His bat's not really wiggling. He's a lot more quieter. It's not quite a toe tap, but when you see him now, it's a matter of timing. And he has said in interviews that the difference between, with timing for a hitter is, and he was holding his fingers like less than an inch apart. It's that much of a split-second decision. Varsho has found a way for him to get consistent, repeated swings and good contact at the plate. So having Varsho go up to the 3 spot, again, with his speed and his base stealing ability, that's a good place for him. Matt Chapman, who has been Mr. Blue Jay for most of the season at the plate. They had Whit Merrifield batting 5th. Now, again, Springer wasn't there, but Merrifield was 5th. I forgot who the DH was, and it was Kirk, Jansen, and Kiermaier. I believe that it is time that you move George Springer down in the lineup, at least until he can figure things out. Remember, you move hitters around all the time that are struggling. Springer, for whatever reason, whether he's ill, whether he's banged up, he just has not been the George Springer we have come to expect, and that Major League Baseball opponents expect. I think they're exploiting the fact that he's getting a little frustrated at the plate. So I like the idea of Bichette leading off, then followed by Guerrero, Varsho, Chapman. I don't even have a problem when Whit Merrifield's in the lineup of batting him in the 5 hole, and have Springer bat 6th. If you want to flip-flop that, depending on the matchups or the situations, I think that would be fine. And then and we're going to talk about this, I think, next week, because there's been a couple of conversations, both behind the scenes at Jays from the Couch and on social media that I've been involved with, about Alejandro Kirk and his struggles managing games and calling pitches. So even if you went Springer 5, Merrifield 6, Kirk 7 as the DH, Danny Jansen at the catcher, and Kiermaier 9, that is a pennant-winning, division-winning, World Series potentially winning lineup. I think that is the best of everything that the Blue Jays can put out there. Ordinarily, I would think that Merrifield in the 6 or 7 hole would ordinarily make a little bit more sense, but he does have some pop in his bat. And I think he's shown a lot of a lot of baseball smarts with the way he's approaching his at-bats, driving the ball the other way, driving the ball to the gap. And I'm a big believer in constructing your lineup where you have 2 leadoff hitters, where you have 1 through 4 or 1 through 5 as one group, and then starting at ideally the 6 hole, you have another leadoff type hitter in there and a good on-get base percentage people in the 9 hole. I think that really lends a dimension to a lineup and length to a lineup that very few major league teams right now can put out there. So I am calling for that Wednesday. I was so happy. I mean, I had the game on. It was almost obligatory. It was an afternoon. There really wasn't much going on. Where I live in Pittsburgh, I think it was raining at the time that the game started. And then I saw that. I'm like, ooh, I really, really like that. So when you're looking at the box score, it's easy to look at who scored runs, how many homers, how many RBIs, how many left on base, stolen bases, whatever it would be. But the actual construction of a lineup, I think, is very, very important. I know when I was a kid, I kept notebooks. I would get the sporting news, every week, and I would go through with every team. I had little tabs in my little binder and all, and I would list lineup combinations for every team, not just the teams that I was being able to watch on TV. Because again, when I was a kid, you had basically games either on your local affiliates, usually a UHF station, and you had the national game of the week on Saturday on NBC. You didn't have all the options we have now. And I would go back and I would actually look at all the different lineup combinations and imagine in my head, hey, boy, that is really cool. That was really great how they moved Mike Andrews, from the leadoff spot down to the 8 spot, and they moved Reggie Smith up, here. Or, wow, the Pirates seem to really, mix and match their lineups pretty well with their platooning. And I'm not a big platooning guy, but I always found that like Danny Murtaugh did a really great job with that, like Bobby Cox did, actually when he was here in Toronto with the platooning. So I think we have found our winning playoff series winning lineup with Bichette leading up. I think he's earned that spot. Vladdy batting second, Mike Trout batting second. I mean, a lot of teams are going to having really their most productive hitters hitting in the 2-hole. So I'm kind of warming up to that. I think Dalton Varsho, with his speed, being a 3-hitter, we're just seeing all that Dalton Varsho can bring. Chapman, we'll put Springer in 5. And then Merrifield, I think Merrifield needs to play virtually every day at second base. Kirk is the DH, Jansen and Kiermaier. If you still insist on wanting to see Brandon Belt at the DH spot, fine. If you're one of those sadomasochistic people that like pain and like heartache and like stress, fine. We'll keep putting Brandon Belt out there on a regular basis. But I think that lineup will rival any lineup in baseball. And I think that it is time. It's not a demotion. He's not being benched. He's just batting in a different place in the lineup. And I think that could jumpstart George Springer for the second half of the season. Well, the second 3 quarters of the season, I guess, since we're about almost not quite at the 50-game mark there. So I wanted to go over that a little bit. Time now for the Fekless Wonder segment. Every week, I come up with some kind of cockamamie, twisted idea that just bounce around my head all week, and then I'm chomping at the bit to talk to you guys about it every Tuesday. And if you are out there watching live, please do leave a comment in the section, whether you're watching live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. During the week, I do go back. There was Dulce Maris left a couple of comments that I didn't see during the show, or that I missed during the show, and was able to catch up with him and have a nice conversation. I've had some people bring up things in the live in-game chats from the show. So never hesitate. Don't be shy. You are part of this show. You're already co-hosting in a lot of ways, especially when you contribute that way. So make sure you put your questions out there. If you think I'm wrong about the lineup, please let me know that. But my wonder for this week is, I wonder, of the players on the current Blue Jay roster, who in time, by the end of their career or the end of their stay in Toronto, could be considered the all-time player at their position. And you remember, many of you might remember in 1999, they had the all-century team in Boston at Fenway Park at the All-Star game. There's been a lot of arguments. Well, I guess they would be arguments, but articles posted throughout the years that talk about the all-time best players or best roster for every franchise. You see it in a lot of different formats. I took my list of who really are the all-time Blue Jays right now as a conglomeration of something from CBS Sports, CBSSports.com. What was the guy's name? Matt Snyder. Matt Snyder does a great job covering baseball. He was the primary one, but to kind of offset a little bit, there's a site called Baseball Egg that has some pretty interesting ways to not only use analytics, but basically just analyze team strategies, team histories. They have a lot of interesting stuff on there. And also Axios.com published an all-time Blue Jays roster. So I'm going to go down through it position by position. I'm going to do the pitchers last, even though they are number one on your scorecard. People that actually still keep score. Every position has a number of pitchers, 1, catchers 2, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to start with position players, and we're going to start with catchers. Now, the consensus was that Ernie Whitt was the all-time best catcher in Blue Jays history. There was some of the sites that when they kind of went two of these positions, Russell Martin got a lot of love, and Russell Martin certainly had some great years with the Blue Jays. But it's hard to argue that Ernie Whitt was not the most valuable catcher in Blue Jays history. He had 134 home runs for his career, 534 runs batted. And remember, he batted lower in the order. He didn't bat, 3, 4, 5 for the most part. He was batting lower in the order. He's an original Blue Jay. He was drafted in the expansion draft from the Boston Red Sox. Red Sox made that mistake, though actually maybe he might have had to play because I think maybe Fisk was hurt at the end of 1976, so they had to bring catchers up. But I think Ernie Whitt became a revelation, for the people drafting in Seattle and Toronto snagged him up. 35% of base runners were successful when he was behind the plate. And when you consider in the era that he was playing, so again, you're looking from 1977 through 1989. Okay. The 80s was a time with a lot of great base stealers, base runners. A lot of teams were a lot more aggressive, a lot more small ball. So that 35% really wasn't bad whatsoever. I can't imagine that either of the catchers on the roster now, Alejandro Kirk or Danny Jansen, would ever be able to surpass Ernie Whitt as the all-time catcher. So I'm going to grade the players on the roster now as no, they'll never be an all-time great for the franchise. Maybe so, depending on how things come out. Maybe so. Or yes, they are the all-time great. By the time they're done, they're the all-time great. At first base, I think of all of the positions, this one is the toughest call. Carlos Delgado, and we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, the fact that the Blue Jays need to retire his number, what a great player he was. He needs to be considered at some point by the committee. I don't know whether I guess he would not be expansion era, but whatever group that would be, he needs to get some serious consideration for a Hall of Fame voting. Over an average between 1996 and 2004, he averaged, this is the average, not the best season, he averaged 40 homers, 124 RBIs, 105 runs scored, and his slash line was 286, 397, 565. It's hard to imagine that anybody could ever be better than Carlos Delgado. But we have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in our lineup now. So many of you are going to jump out and say, oh, Vladdy's going to be the all-time first baseman. I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit on what I'm going to say maybe so. Okay, Vladdy is the progress he has made from the time he came up. I mean, he lit up the minor leagues. He struggled in the early going. Certainly defensively, he did. He's become a Gold Glove first baseman. He gets better literally every day. He had an MVP season that was denied him because of the Shohei Ohtani mania gripping Major League Baseball. Vladdy is going to have to keep doing it pretty much every year of his career to convince me that he would be the all-time Blue Jays first baseman. So we're going to give Vladdy a grade of maybe so. Carlos Delgado, for those of you that are too young to have actually watched him play for the Blue Jays, actually in his prime, he was one of the players early on, I think, in his development that Cito Gaston's commitment to playing veterans all the time and kind of ignoring, the younger players. I guess that was his revenge for never really getting a shot with the Braves. Even the Padres kind of overlooked him a little bit and played veteran players during those expansion years, but it's a shame. Second base, Roberto Alomar. I understand the tendency among Blue Jay fans to be more politically correct than, let's say, I would be, or that American baseball fans would be, and take the fact that he is a despicable human being that has done inexcusable things in his life. He's a Hall of Fame second baseman. There is a reason that he didn't stay very long in any destination that he was there. But bottom line is, when he came over with Joe Carter from the Padres, those were the final pieces for that team to win a world championship. There's nobody on the roster. Whit Merrifield is on the back nine of his career. I don't think he's going to play long enough in Toronto to surpass what Robbie Alomar did. Just a spectacular defender, wonderful base runner. He seemed to always get the big hit. So it's a big no. None of the second basemen, Merrifield, Biggio, Espinal, whoever you want to put in there, they are not going to be better than Roberto Alomar. At third base, I was surprised to see Josh Donaldson's name at the top of the three sites that I looked at when I was combining this. I really thought that Kelly Gruber would be the guy that people would turn to, or at least one of the sites would. But, I mean, Josh Donaldson had such an impact and such a spectacular, if brief, stay in Toronto. It is hard to not say that he is the all-time greatest third baseman in Blue Jays history, MVP in 2015. He finished, I think, fourth in 2016. He was instrumental when he was healthy of getting the Jays to the ALCS in 15 and 16. A good enough defender, but he was clutch. He was a clutch hitter. He liked the spotlight. That's what you want from a veteran presence in your lineup. I'm going to say no one is going to supplant, at least on the roster now, Josh Donaldson. The only reason Matt Chapman won't is I don't think he's going to be here long enough to do that. I think this could very well be his last year in Toronto. The Jays only have X number of dollars to spend, and that money can be spent more wisely other places, I think. So I think Josh Donaldson is going to remain the all-time greatest third baseman. So it's a hard no, only because I don't think Chapman's going to be here long enough. And shortstop, the consensus was Tony Fernandez. A lot of people in Blue Jays fan base believe Fernandez should be getting Hall of Fame consideration. He's already in the, has been honored. It's in the Ring of Excellence with the team. He was here 3 different times. He wasn't here for 92 because he was a key part of the Alomar Carter trade, along with Red McGriff. But 93, he had a great playoff, great World Series, terrific defender, good base runner. So you would think that he'd be a guy to be tough to not. But this is one of my few yeses that I'm going to have here. So far, I've had no with a couple of maybe so's. My first yes is Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette, even if he does leave after his extension and after, through free agency, I think Bo Bichette will establish himself as the greatest shortstop in the history of the Blue Jays. He gets frustrating. Yes, I know he gets frustrated, but Bo Bichette, by far, is the best. Maybe even now he may be the best, most valuable shortstop in Blue Jays history. But going forward, don't know. In left field, George Bell. The Fekless Wonder of Blue Jays players, if you will. Surly, always hard-hitting, a little erratic in some of his actions, especially in the field. But George Bell had a year in 1987 that was one of the best in Major League history. He was a key part of those first winning teams, in Toronto. I'm going to say maybe so. I'm a big believer, in Dalton Varsho. And I get people, are miss Lourdes Gurriel and they miss Teoscar Hernandez. And they're like, oh, Varsho's, look how he struggled. Look how he corrected himself. And defensively, he's as good as you get. So I think in time, if Varsho stays here, Varsho maybe so replaces George Bell as the all-time left fielder. Center field, I was surprised that neither Devon White or Lloyd Mosby got a lot of love, especially Devo, because he was on the championship teams. He's probably one of the 20 best defensive center fielders in the history of baseball, not just in Toronto. But unanimously, they picked Vernon Wells. And Vernon Wells was a terrific baseball player. I mean, I loved Vernon Wells, and he played in a black hole era of Blue Jays baseball. A lot of his accomplishments, I think, were overshadowed by the fact that J.P. Ricciardi was a moron and didn't know how to run a baseball team, and kept every time the Jays seemed to be getting good, Ricciardi did something to make them bad or make them worse. It's going to be no there because Kiermaier is not going to be here more than 2 years. And he's only on a 1-year contract. My guess is they try to bring him back for at least another year. But I can't see anybody surpassing Vernon Wells. And if you want to look at Devon White, I think even nobody on this roster right now. Now, Varsho stays long and he moves over to center. I might grade him as a maybe so there. And in right field, it hurt my heart because I love Jesse Barfield. I had the pleasure of meeting him and his wife. They used to shop at a home entertainment store that I managed up in Niagara Falls, New York. I had my office there. I was like a district manager for a record chain. He was a wonderful player, probably one of the top 3 outfield runs I've ever seen. He was not the best right fielder ever. I agree. There's a consensus there too. It's Joey Bats. It's Jose Bautista. What Bautista did to turn his career around, I shouldn't even say turn it around, to finally, he never gave up. He was with the Pirates 3 different times. He was with the Orioles. He was with the Rays. He was bouncing back and forth, back and forth. Finally, he was freed from the cesspool that was the Pirates back, in the late aughts. Came to Toronto, and he was just amazing. He was a better defensive outfielder than people might give him credit for. He had a pretty good throwing arm, but he led the team. He led the league in homers, walks, and total bases twice in various seasons. Jose Bautista was amazing. It's going to be another no for me there because I do not believe that George Springer will surpass what Jose Bautista, Joey Bats meant to Blue Jays Nation. I think that would be a tough one. I didn't do the DH, but there are some players that we haven't even mentioned yet. Fred McGriff, John Olerud, Joe Carter. You can even throw in Edwin Encarnacion that had major offensive impacts on this team. I think it's hard. DH, especially now when they're rotating through, it's hard to do that. Pitching-wise, I looked at the best right-handed starting pitcher in Blue Jays history. That's Dave Steve. Sorry, folks, he's better than Roy Halladay. Even though Halladay is in the Hall of Fame, and Steve has been criminally overlooked for that. And the best left-handed starting pitcher, Jimmy Key. On this Blue Jay roster, it's hard-nosed. Nobody's going to approach those guys. And there's right-handed starting pitching. You could throw in Roger Clemens for his stay and all he did when he was here in Toronto. But I don't think that is anybody that can get placed. Certainly on this roster, Kikuchi is not better than Jimmy Key. Jimmy Key, go back and look at Baseball Reference, look at game stories, look at box scores. Jimmy Key was steady, reliable, and a much better pitcher than he ever got credit for. So I would say Jimmy Key. So our starting pitching, there's nobody on this roster that would be an all-time great in Blue Jays history. In the bullpen, I think of all the picks, I think unanimously, other than Tony Fernandez, I think it was Tom Henke, who had a terrific career in Toronto. Even with Jimmy Williams mismanaging him for so many critical years, he had a wonderful stay here in Toronto. He was not drafted and developed by Toronto. He started his career and ended his career in Texas. The homegrown, home-developed, home country, hometown boy of Jordan Romano. I honestly believe by the time he either leaves Toronto or the time that he retires as a Blue Jay, he will be the all-time greatest relief pitcher in Blue Jays history. I could go on and on about this. In fact, I've already gone on and on 5 minutes more than I was supposed to. But I think exploring Blue Jays history is very important. Not enough Blue Jay fans do that. It's a relatively young franchise when you consider the Yankees and Red Sox and White Sox and Cubs and Cardinals and Giants, Dodgers on down the line. But there has been some really marvelous, talented players on this Toronto roster since 1977. And I think it's important to go back and take a look at them, to honor them, to analyze them, and just make sure that people that didn't get a chance to watch some of these great players know about them. Well, I'm done for this week. Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It is the Fekless Wonder and the On Fek Circle. Thursdays, Karen Suter's Sunny Side of the Dome, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And on Mondays, coming back soon, is the Jason the Couch radio podcast. And that is hosted by Shaun Doyle. You can always download on demand anywhere finer podcasts are found. I'll be back again next Tuesday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of the show. And we'll talk to you in a week.